You know you're supposed to do big damage by the end of this phase, but how exactly do you know that? Maybe people like me told you, or you read it in a guide, or those warriors on discords like Fight Club told you Fury was 100% going to exceed all expectations as early as Ulduar. But really, most informed people looking for exact DPS numbers of what their class and spec are capable of head to the Sims. For better or for worse, many view these Sims as gospel. If you ask me, it's usually pretty dang close, and is almost always better than what people call heal scrap. They're especially useful when used in relative terms, like one piece of gear is 50 DPS better than another in a certain setup and so on. It's much less useful from a total DPS standpoint. For example, if the simulator says you're going to do 9,000 DPS or something. Why, you ask? Because it's basically always with perfect play and almost never assumes any sort of latency. That's besides the obvious stuff like how encounters vary. Of course you'll exceed those numbers if you're fully buffed on Hodir, and you'll come far short of it if all you're doing is running across the map looking for corruptor tentacles on Yogg. Those overall DPS numbers on Sims are for maintained uptime on a boss. But players, the best of the best, especially on short single target encounters, should be able to approach or exceed those simulator numbers with excellent or perfect play and, simply put, very good RNG. Otherwise, Sims may be over or under reporting total DPS amounts. And if that's the case, then by how much? So at the end of phase 1, I went ahead and grabbed a ton of the top parses for both Arms and Fury specs from Patchwork. You do nothing except stand and DPS the boss in this fight with full uptime, and basically all these warriors are min-max like crazy and in full BIS. The number one determinant of total DPS, especially in phase 1, is total fight length, so I went ahead and plotted these DPS numbers against fight length on a graph. Then I plotted the expected DPS numbers from the Sims on the same graph, and voila, here she is for Fury. Now this is quite a few data points. Keep in mind that these are all still 99.5% parses or higher, but we said we wanted to do it with the best of the best, the luckiest of the lucky, right? So let's narrow it down to the top 25. Now this is pretty useful information. You have to parse top 25 in the world to be in this graph, but let's enhance this one more time to top 10. And here you go. Even the top 10 parses in the world didn't match the expected simulator outcome. Not a single one. So, okay, let's assume the Fury Warrior Sim is over-reporting then. Next, let's find out by how much. 2 to 3% doesn't sound like much, but at the top 10 level at the end of phase 1, this actually translates to about 200 DPS. But even then, you might say, yeah, well, 200 isn't too much, except if you expand this to the top 25, it jumps 70 more DPS. That's for if you expect to parse top 25 in the world, a 99.9% parse. If you are only a 99% even parser, then the difference between that and your simulator estimate is massive. But like I said, Sims expect the best of the best, so we'll give it the biggest benefit of the doubt and say it overreports by 2.68%. It's possible that this is a flat overreport, a constant 200 DPS, but I suspect that this isn't the case. We can extrapolate this data and plug it into phase 2 numbers, but first let's see if the results are similar for Arms Warrior. This expected curve is very high, as it should be, but again, not a single data point is able to match or exceed the curve. So let's narrow it down to 25. And then again to the top 10. This Warrior Sim is still overreporting, and if you look at the number of values, it's 75 to 90 DPS for a top 10 part. That's less than half the amount of Fury, and if you guess that it's because Fury does more damage anyways, then you'd be wrong because it doesn't do that much more damage. The top 25 for an Arms Warrior again jumps at about 70 more DPS, just like Fury, so that tracks pretty well. With the biggest benefit of the doubt, Arms Warrior overreports by about 1 to 1.5%. This means that the Arms simulation is currently more accurate than the Fury simulation, which would also suggest that the gap between Arms and Fury in reality is closer than the sim suggests, although only by about 1.5% or so. Not enough to close huge gaps, but let's go ahead and move on to projecting this data onto phase 2 numbers. So, how much damage will you actually do in Ulduar? For Alliance Warriors, the previous sim estimated DPS totals for 3-minute and 2-minute encounters are shown here. Approaching 10k DPS for Fury and 9k for Arms. Not bad. However, we've already determined that the Warrior Sim is overreporting, so let's go ahead and make our adjustment. They're pared down a bit, but only by a few percent. These numbers should represent the absolute top of warrior parses at the end of phase 2, like top 10. Even rank number 25 will probably be close to 100 DPS less than this. Fewer warriors outside the top 1 or 200, while still 99 parsing and full BIS, can expect to do worse by like 600 DPS on a 3-minute encounter. I don't want to discourage you, but I'm trying to point out just how highly you have to rank in order to reach these top end numbers. There are some interesting things to point out here. The damage difference at 180 seconds is 880 DPS between Fury and Arms. At 120 seconds, it's 773. The gap closes by about 100 DPS on short encounter. All of these sims are done without the warrior sundering, which obviously would lower your total DPS. You're pretty much expecting another warrior to do all the sundering or a rogue to expose. How much does that lower Arms or Fury DPS after adjustments compared to Assassination or Combat Rogue? Is Fury DPS high enough compared to Rogues to bring multiple if one of them is sundering? Or is it too low and should you just nix warriors altogether and bring a Combat Rogue? Maybe after doing the Rogue sim analysis, Assassination is just way better than Combat, and it's actually worth it to bring an Arms warrior even if Arms damage sims lower. But how much lower is acceptable? Well, stay tuned for all those answers on the upcoming Rogue versus Warrior video. That should be a fun one. That's it. If you have any questions, drop them below in the comments or come by on Twitch, link below in the description to catch me live. If you like the sort of content and want to help support this channel, be sure to like this video and subscribe. Thanks for watching and see you next time.